Hi, Dr. Sam.
Hi, Emily.
um, Really nice to have you on our Skype call, on our Zoom call.
Thank you for having me. I'm thrilled.
Oh,
This is quite the highlight of my day.
and mine too. The mutual. So, Dr. Sam Akbar, I'm going to very quickly do a little introduction of who you are and how you can help. So you are a clinical psychologist. You work in private practice as a therapist and life coach. Is that correct?
Yep, but mainly in the NHS.
Mainly in the NHS. So your kind of other job is with high achieving women with hectic lives, and
Yeah,
you're the author of the incredible, useful, and very practical Mind Minutes newsletter, which offers ways to enhance your well-being in 60 seconds or less, which I will link to at the bottom of the video. And then your main job is in the NHS treating refugees and torture survivors.
that's right.
Which I think must bring a healthy bit of balance to your view of how bad things really are right now.
Mm-hmm.
Although we're all kind of suffering from stress and anxiety
Exactly.
related to being in isolation. And one thing that you said and I will quote in your
Ah.
in one of, in one of your recent Mind Minutes was
Mm.
we're living in strange times. We cannot control a lot of what is happening, but we can choose how we behave and what we say. And I felt like there was quite a lot contained within that little pearl of wisdom. So I suppose I'd like to know a bit more about your work with refugees and whether there are any lessons in that to be taken for our current circumstances.
Okay, so I've been working with refugees for, gosh, a long time, probably nearly a decade. And I'm fortunate enough to work in the only specialist clinic for refugees with PTSD in the country, so within the NHS. I've come into this situation always working with people who have been under, I guess, at the extreme end of human experience, of kind of cruelty and separation from loved ones. In terms of perspective, I guess I'm slightly loath to say, oh, unless you're a tortured refugee, I can't really,
Yeah, we
because
don't want to
because
say
then
that.
where do you draw the line, right? I think it's not about comparing suffering, but what I do think is helpful is to broaden your bandwidth for what happens in the rest of the world a lot of the time. And actually, I think we have been very lucky, and I include myself in that we've had a lot of prosperity. We've had a lot of political stability. We haven't had war on our soil for a long time. We haven't had a disruption of this kind to our life for many of us ever. But always, all the time I've been working with clients, I've seen how easily that slips away. But there is, I think the thing I've always thought when I work with my clients is I hear horrible, horrible things. It's always the sadnesses are never the horrors. It's the things that shock me or upset me are always much more around the sadness of families being split, or not being able to ever go home to your country and see your parents again, and having to say, we've worked with countless people who have to say goodbye to their parents when they die on the phone. And I feel like this has ever been thus for a lot of our clients. So it's always been in my mind. So it's sort of half my head has always been there for a long time now. And I guess I think there are things to be learnt from that. And certainly the first thing is to have empathy and understanding for people who come here and the circumstances under which they come here, what life might be like for them. So I think that's the first thing all of us can do more usefully. I think it's helpful to find common humanity.
Mm.
One of the things that people often get into in depression, for example, is, oh, I feel really awful, I feel depressed, and I blame myself because I should have a happy life.
Mm.
And you can just
be about feeling.
Yeah, and there's always going to be someone who on paper it looks worse for.
Yeah.
And actually that there's no way out of that trap. So I'm kind of wary about saying that. But having said that, I think we can have perspective and take different perspectives.
And what do you say to someone who is saying, as I imagine a lot of people are now, I can't be with my family right now?
I think then, so it's really about, so being in touch with your values and the areas of life that are important with you. So how can you show up and live your values despite what's going on, even though this is going on? And you still have that value of loving and caring for your family. It's got to be different. And I think it's where people get a lot, it's what I was saying to you a bit earlier. I just sometimes want to go, I don't want it to be different. Yeah. I can't have any control over that. I can acknowledge that I'm having that thought, and I do, and that it tells me that I feel frustrated. But if I start kind of like just trying to make it the same, it can't be. And that way frustration lies. But how can you connect with your family? How can you be, how can you still be in contact with them? We're very lucky. Most of us have myriad ways of doing that. But you can, I'm really missing my dad. And I feel very upset about the thought when I can see him again. But I speak to him every day. And the other thing that I've done is I've been drawing lots of pictures of him as a way of kind of just being with him in a kind of different way. And so I have some pictures of him from university, and I've been sitting with them and just drawing portraits of them, and I'm so in it. It just feels like looking at him in a different way, and it's quite moving.
That's really lovely.
And I send them to him and stuff, but he knows that then I'm really thinking about him and looking and trying to do something that isn't just always verbal, I guess. And that has been surprisingly powerful.
That's really nice.
So, it's not the same. I'd rather go over to his house and hang out with him, but I can't. So it is different. So how are we going to, in the face of this, how are we going to be? Like, there are choices about that.
Yeah, that's a really important point. Can you find another way to connect with that value of wanting to be with family? And also, is there, in terms of kind of your focus as well, because I think a lot of the focus is going inward at the moment and thinking of being restricted, feeling very isolated. Are there ways that you would suggest to sort of break through that and expand your...
Well, I think the first thing is noticing when you start getting really caught up in your thinking. And so the clues to that is, you're sort of sitting there and like 20 minutes have passed and you've just been in your head going around scenarios or with images of what's going to happen, asking yourself a lot of why questions. Yeah. Basically ruminating, going over and over stuff again. And you'll know it also because you won't feel so great physiologically. Won't give you lots of energy. You'll feel pretty grim. Yeah. And I think one thing that you can do quite quickly, and as you know from my newsletter, it's sort of about stuff that you can do quite fast, is, when you're caught up in your thinking, we call it being fused, like sheep being fused to your thoughts, like really stuck to them. And what you want to do is try and defuse and just get yourself space between you and your thoughts. So if you're thinking, you're stuck in this sort of downward spiral of where does this end, or how will I cope, or none of that. Does any of that serve you? Do you come out of that with a solution? Very rarely.
just feel a bit heavy and down, and
Yeah, and it's normal. It's not, I don't want anyone to beat themselves up for doing that. What I want them to do is to notice it and then have a choice. Okay, do I want to stay in doing this, or do I want to try and do something else? So it's a bit like, if you imagine your thoughts are all written on a piece of paper, when you're fused with them, it's like they're up in your face. You can't see anything else. You can't see there's no way of seeing what's around you, of who you love or what matters to you or what action you can take. All your options you can't see. So we want to not necessarily get rid of that piece of paper, but we want to get it down. So I'm not saying think positively, it'll all be fine, because I think that doesn't really help. I think it's more about saying, I can notice I'm having these thoughts and they're episodes or events in my head. I can notice I'm having a thought that I'm scared I'll lose my job. Or I can notice I'm having a thought that I feel I'm never going to get out of this situation.
So could I say to myself, say I've noticed I'm doing this downward spiral. Could I say to myself, I am noticing that I am having this thought right now? And would that be a way of creating some of that?
Yeah. So I won't earn any money. So if you really fuse with that thought and have it up in your face, what happens to that thought if you say, I'm having the thought I won't earn any money? It creates a bit of distance. And in that distance is problem solving. It's working out, can I do other things to earn money? How do I solve this problem? Right? So you've got the thought. When the thought's here, there's no room to actually do something about that. Right? What you want to do is just notice that thought is going on in your head, and you have a huge number of thoughts in your head every day. Of course, the more negative ones will capture you because that's what they're designed to do, as you know. But I also have thoughts like, oh, my slippers are a bit old. Should I have new slippers? And I wonder where I could get coriander from now. And I don't really like that new Head and Shoulders shampoo. Should I buy more expensive? There are 1,000 things in my head. I could attend to all of them, but I don't. And it's the certain ones capture us. So what if you could just treat it like, imagine your head prints out all its thoughts in a day. You'd have a stack of papers this high. What if you could just treat them?
Videos about this, actually.
What if you could just treat them all the same way, as they're all thoughts, and I choose what I buy into. And if it helps me, great. And if it doesn't help me, I don't have to buy into it. And that's that space between the thinker and the thought.
Yeah. So you're just kind of driving a little wedge in there between what's going on in your head, and therefore that expansion allows for actions on those thoughts.
And then it allows for perspective. Doesn't necessarily mean you pop out and you go, hey, this is awesome, it's all great. It's not about that. It's about, I can see then what I can do differently, what I can, I can think about what's important to me, how I can do that. But it does mean you have to acknowledge, there's some discomfort there.
Lovely. And what about instead of thinking about what we can't do, what's going wrong for us, like what about, offering up something that we can do, thinking about what we can offer for other people? And that might be the last thing that we want to think about. But I think, altruism and helping others is often a way of taking your mind out and having it elsewhere. What do you think about that?
Absolutely. And actually, many years ago, when I worked in TV, I was very interested. I remember doing some research. I became really interested in what makes people happy. And I found some research done by a guy in America. I can't remember his name. He's quite well known. And he looked at what made people happy. And basically, they found that people who volunteered a lot had the bits of their brains that kind of signal kind of contentment were very much more active in those people than they were in people who didn't volunteer. Even if they had suffered loss or divorce or chronic illness, they were still able to do something for others. And there's another really lovely study of people in an old people's home. Half were given a plant to look after, and the other half were given a plant, but the staff looked after it. And the people who kind of took an active role in caring for something or taking responsibility for it did much better.
Yeah.
And so I think the evidence is there that kind of, connecting with others, helping others, but also, looking after yourself as well, can be really useful. And you can do that in very small ways. It doesn't have to be a massive thing. It could be a hello to a neighbor. It could be a note through the door saying, do you need anything? Or not even asking, or cutting some flowers from your garden and putting them in a jar and leaving them on their doorstep. Things that really small things can have an impact.
I spoke to Stella Duffy in another video, and she's doing a thing called Tiny Revolutions, and she started putting poetry into plant pots and leaving it on neighbours' doorsteps.
That's lovely.
Just to it's another way of just connecting, isn't it? And it's a way of connecting with social distance as well, which I think we're all craving right now.
Exactly. So, but it's an active thing, isn't it? You're taking, so that those are things you can control. You can't necessarily control what pops up in your head, because as I said, all sorts of nonsense pops up in your head every day. That's the nature of our brains. You can't necessarily control what you feel, but you can control what you say, and you can control what you do. Yeah, because you can do things even when you don't feel like doing them. We do them all the time, right? That's not unusual. I often think, oh, I won't go to work, but I get up and I do it. I make my legs move in the direction of work, right? We do things. You have control over what you do and what you say.
And so often the thing that you don't want to do is actually the thing that's really beneficial, like just sticking to a schedule or getting up and doing a bit of exercise.
You follow a plan, not a mood.
That's great. Yeah.
Because I
want to write that down and stick it on my wall.
Yeah, absolutely. Follow a plan, not a mood. Internal moods come, go. I mean, think about how you feel differently in the day, and then you're trying to do something on the off chance you might feel like doing it. It's kind of slightly disastrous. So, I think those small little manageable steps where you can do something for somebody else can be really helpful. And it gives you some control, some agency. In times when there is a lot of uncertainty and you can't control a lot of things.
I think that's really great, because I think we're all slightly free falling at the moment and feeling like, where is the end point of lockdown? What will the world look like at the end of it? And I think, thinking about bringing it back to, well, what can I be in control of? Like you said, my thoughts, my feelings, my behaviors.
Yeah.
and taking a look at those is really helpful. So we've covered quite a lot of ground here. If you were to sort of sum up what we've covered in a few phrases, would you bring it back to that quote at the beginning, or would you like to offer, do you feel like we've gone in a slightly different tangent?
I guess what would I say? I would say that, you can, it's a balance of pulling out and taking a bigger perspective, right? And not comparing yourself unfavorably with someone else having, not having lockdown FOMO. Right.
You mentioned to me before about don't compare with celebrities, and don't create envy by looking at, well, they've got a hot tub and a massive garden and they're having a great time.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a terrible one for looking at that and thinking, why am I not doing that, right? And I have to acknowledge that in myself. So, and it just irritates me no end. You compare and despair, don't you? but it is a normal thing to do. We are built to compare because we want to check we're fitting in with the group. And in evolutionary terms, if you don't fit in with the group, you risk being rejected by it and you're dead. You can then choose what you do with what you see. You can take it off your phone, you can limit it, you can notice that you think certain stuff when that stuff shows up. You can learn to manage it differently. You know,
There's a video coming up on that as well, and that evolutionary drive to, if we can't just test ourselves immediately, we look around.
I think, you know, if I would say the things that I think are really, really helpful are to notice your thinking, diffuse from it. Yeah. Don't push the emotions away. You can make room for them. That's a kind of bigger topic as well.
Yeah.
And then check out how much more space and choice you have in what you say and do, both to yourself and others. And that's where you find meaning, right? Even in the smallest moments. And I always come back to, I don't know if you know Viktor Frankl's book, Man's Search for Meaning, but you know, you don't have to listen to me, listen to him. He survived the concentration camps and talked about how the last freedom man has is to choose how he treats himself and other people. You can't take that from people.
We can always choose.
And certainly for most of us, we're not in those extreme situations. We can choose. So I think those are the things. It's noticing, it's diffusing, it's making room for uncomfortable emotions, and then it's doing and saying the things that matter to you about the kind of person you want to be.
Wonderful. Thank you, Dr. Sam. I'm going to end rather cheesily with that quote. Everything can be taken from a man, but one thing, the last of the human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's own way.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much.
You're very welcome. Thank you for having me.